Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. And this is a panel that I am personally very interested in because I think that when you invest in women, you automatically invest in success. And so I just want to know, what are some of the traits that make investing in women a best bet? As we know, when you invest in a woman, you get 35% more on your investment. And so our panel here, these are all high-level investors, and so I have a few questions for them. And whoever can jump out and introduce yourself too when you speak. So what unique strategies or leadership traits have you observed in women-led startups that help explain why these companies consistently deliver over twice the revenue per dollar invested?
Well, it's amazing to be in this room. I recall back when I first started off in finance, I was often the only woman in the room. And I just want to say I'm delighted too, because my 10-year-old daughter at table 17 there has exposure to this sea of powerful women leaders of all backgrounds here today. So I'm Bethke. I lead private fund investing for Mousse partners in the US and Europe. Mousse allocates across public and private asset classes from venture to buyout. So from a fund investor perspective, even though I don't have to invest in women funds, I want to invest because of common traits, leadership traits that I see time and time again that really make a difference when it comes to driving successful outcomes. So I'll highlight two. The first is relationship building. So access to great deal flow really starts with strong relationships, and over, I see women leaders really excelling here, building real, authentic relationships that open doors that others can't. It comes to mind a female founder of a buyout fund I know didn't win the deal by name dropping her connection to Jamie Dimon or paying the highest price. She earned the CEO's respect by through her strategic insights and her transparency and her humble low ego approach. So that type of authenticity is a real standout. And I'd also mention decision making. I think from time and time again when I speak with founders and management teams, I hear that women founders of venture buyout funds, their diligence is next level, digging deeper, really running tighter processes, and staying highly selective about who and what they're investing in. So this authentic relationship building and decisive leadership really are two examples at the heart of what is driving women-led funds to deliver that 1x return over male funds that Howard was referring to earlier.
I mean, women are fantastic leaders, but I think it does start with deal flow. You know, I'm looking for women who can like walk through fire and, walk through walls, walk on water, and who just won't give up. And I think that's not necessarily female or male. It's just if you're going to invest your money with someone, you want them to be an incredible founder. What I've seen, particularly with our women, is that they're more efficient with the capital. Part of that is because of how thoughtful they are. I always say women need a larger miscellaneous category because they'll be like, we only need this much money. But if any of you know what it's like to build a business, it's not straight uphill. It kind of, you go up, down, all around. Sometimes you're way down, sometimes you're way up. And it's not a straight line. So I'm always like, I don't feel like there's any room for error here. Go back to the drawing board and how much do you really need in case it doesn't go exactly how you think it's going to go, because we're very reasonable human beings and we've And so are men. Men are reasonable too. But women take much more calculated risk, really measure it out. The dollar goes a lot farther, but that's also because women, as you heard many times today, can't raise as much capital. It's much harder. A lot more is against women and minorities. A female minority, like all the odds are against you if you look at the data. So those are some of the things I think about. When I think of great founders, I actually have a really incredible one in the room named Tia Gordon. She's right here.
Right here.
And I think of her as an incredible founder. She helped design and operate the 9/11 Memorial previously, and she's so humble about it. She would never tell you that, and like that's such a badass job, right? And now she's running this EV charger company that's beating out Tesla in all of the major cities. And what's great about her, I'm sorry, I'm just speaking her praises because you're incredible, is she's obsessed with the problem. She just wants to fix the problem. She gets really granular, and I think that makes just the best founders, female or male. They can't sleep at night until they fix it, until their CAC is the number they want it to be. And it's not about the fame and fortune, it's about the problem. And I think that makes an incredible founder.
This is so interesting how you framed it that way, Jesse, because I think you and we think about things very similarly. I ended up investing in Tia Gordon as well. And the thing about you, Tia, you're so modest about your achievements. It's only after I came here and ran into you that I found out that It's Electric, your company, is now also active in Los Angeles. And really, this is major because this is a 9th city, I believe, and it's a very, very simple concept. How does it work, right? If you're trying to scale up EV charging, now It's Electric is helping you to charge curbside by basically negotiating these partnerships with these property owners. So this is really, really major. It's a very, very simple innovation, but how do you scale that into something that is actually meaningful and the kind of company that can get the venture type returns that we look for? And then the other thing I want to add about you specifically, and I don't want you to be shy about this, is I just find that women are a little bit more astute in the way that they manage relationships with a certain level of emotional intelligence. Give a really example. You wanted to connect with Howard. You want Howard to invest in your company. And you found out that I knew Howard. I was on a panel with Howard. I know one of his former business partners, but you're not doing it in that very male, obvious way. It's really about connecting around shared affinities and how best to approach Howard without it being obvious or just that business card first and that approach. And so I just want to say one more thing, because I don't want to hog the mic, but I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today, November 14th, because 5 years ago to this day is when I was in Brooklyn Hospital and I almost died of COVID. And I came out a week later, and it was Thanksgiving that my former business partner with whom I'd launched the Equity Alliance, Dick Parsons, called me. And for those who don't know Dick Parsons, I have to speak to him about him every single time I have a mic. Dick Parsons was an African-American guy from Brooklyn, son of an electrician who rose to become the head of Time Warner when it was the world's largest media company, Citigroup, CBS, the Rockefeller Foundation, the list goes on. And he called me, he said, I have cancer. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around, but I want my last venture to be with you, and I want you to be a custodian of my legacy so that we can invest in venture capital exclusively in women and people of color, which is what we've been doing. And I think it's really important that people can be intentional in that way. And even you, Howard, we were talking earlier about your firm was very male-driven before, but then you had a woman bring the change. So I think it's important that even though we might be late to the party, we lead with intention in everything we do.
Well, that was great. So I want to direct this next question to Howard, because I think you've been talking about this all day. What are the hidden barriers or biases that persist even now to funding for women? And there's so many founders and want to be founders in this room, so what should women be on the lookout for?
Well, certainly the bias is about, asking those questions about where women are in their stage of life. Are they having kids? Have they had their kids? Are they going to work as hard as men? That's the bias, because of course you do, and harder in most times. But that bias, you have to be very careful for any questions that get anywhere close to those kind of issues, and head them off very directly, as quickly as you can. And that is a key bias. The other key bias is, are you technical enough for whatever you're going into? So, we expect technical knowledge of our founders, and has been an assumption, which is no longer true, but the assumption was, well, women aren't as technical. Women don't do math. That's all BS. But that is an implicit bias that's still around, because it's only now that we've got, Cornell has 50% of the engineering school is female, Stanford and a bunch of others. But 10 years ago, that wasn't true. 15 years ago, it wasn't true. So there is that implicit statistical bias, if you will, and then people turn a statistical bias into a bias against the individual in front of them, who may not represent that statistic at all. So you've got to make sure you differentiate yourself from sort of the average statistic. You're not the average. You're an individual, special person. And you have to show, as you're pitching to any VC, what your background is and why you have the right skills, because otherwise some of them, too many of them, will make assumptions that are not correct and about what's going on. Those are two key things.
When I think about that, there are these biases, and I'll just tell you a story that I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble in this room for sharing, but we were raising our third fund, which we've since closed, and thank God. We were looking under every rug for money. It was a really tough fundraising is really hard if you've ever had experience with it. And, we're doing really well. We have great exits and, a great track record. And I just said, okay, to my team, let's go after this it's an old program that was relaunched by the SBA, the Small Business Association of the United States. It's called the SBIC program. And my team, I'm not even going to look at you because I know you're going to tell me not to tell the story, and I'm going to tell it. Okay. So we were way deep in. We'd spent $100,000 on legal just to apply to this program, because it's a really complicated program to apply to. I had to have 25 references. My team members had to have 25 references. Have you ever had 25 references for anything? Terrifying. They basically own me and my children. We got to about the 10th meeting with them, and they said, hey, we want to have a casual call. And the head of the program gets on and he says, hey, your recommendations are stellar. Your track record's amazing. You have varied co-founders. They gave us all this very specific feedback. They said, we want to get you over the fence on this program, which would basically double our fund plus some. And I was sort of like, where is the but? Where is the but? And he said, but we'd prefer if you had an older male, gray-haired VC on your team. Now, something I haven't shared is that my dad is a venture capitalist. And he said, like your dad or one of his peers. And I was like, I'm a 41-year-old adult. I'm talking to, I obviously didn't say this to the guy, but in my head, I'm fuming and I'm in front of my team. And I just said, I started asking qualifying questions. I said, Dana Settle from Greycroft, which is a great VC firm, is one of our advisors and mentors. Like someone like that, are you saying like an advisor? And they said, no, just like a new partner on your team who is a male, who's older, who's had more experience than you. And I said, I do want to remind you, this is our third fund. And, we had this talk and we sort of shut our computers as we do today. And I was just fuming. I was like, we've come so far. This is the Small Business Association of the United States of America. We have a track record. And then I heard about, it's a long story, but we ended up sending an email saying, hey, we've decided to recuse ourselves from this process because we weren't aware of the older male VC requirement. And I copied everyone I could from the SBA. They called us so fast. So this was 9 months ago. Okay, they called us so fast, and they said, we couldn't believe he said that. I just can't believe that. And then I asked him, and that's exactly what he said. And so that was a very frustrating process for us. We ended up just closing our fund and not moving forward with that. But this is my third fund, and then go on to find out that the woman who took over our process, she said, we just funded a guy who has 0 track record, and we just gave him $30 million. And I was so confused. So the biases are still there. I just wanted to share one personally from 9 months ago. So I think that's a real problem. And if, Gloria, if you want to talk to the SBA, I will hire you so fast.
Megan.
I'd also add on that some of the common labels I hear about women are that they're too soft or too aggressive, but for example, being seen, softness can be also often empathy, which is a trait that I look for in leaders that I back. And then in terms of aggressiveness, I think oftentimes it's these women leaders that are willing to go the extra mile and are rolling up their sleeves, and they're being there for their companies. One VC I know flew to LA for the day to listen in on sales calls, and this wasn't just for show. It was to deeply understand the business development needs and the customer base. And in this founder's view, it was extremely rare to have this happen, and really makes a difference in building companies and helping to drive successful exits. And I know that women often get a bad rap in our industry, probably most industries, for being intense, but women have a unique ability to be both kind and aggressive, and not only is that okay, but it's absolutely necessary to be hell-bent on winning and also being your authentic self.
I do want to mention something. Thank you, Megan, and also Jesse, but I do want to mention the elephant in the room, because we at the Equity Alliance have a dual lens. There's a gender lens, but there's also a racial lens. And if I look around this room, I've counted 3 black women, right? So what you're facing, black women are more or less 7% of the US population. They get 0.1% of the funding, right? So white men get 20 times as much funding as black women. So imagine the odds being stacked against you in a way where you're just so underfunded, and you don't actually have that many role models out there of people who have done it, right? There's Melody Hobson, there's a few women, but in venture, our industry, it's so difficult. And I think we have to face the fact that these inequities are just very real, and unless we do something about it, the gap is going to just keep widening.
Very true. Okay, this is going to be my last question for this panel. What is it that you think needs to change, to shift structurally, policy-wise? We know that there are gender biases, but what kind of policies should be out there? What kind of structural inserts should there be? I almost think to myself, and speaking as a black woman and knowing so many women that start businesses, most of us are relegated to using credit cards, parents, grandparents, everything. We just don't even think about seeking capital or a loan or getting in contact with the SBA, because we think it's such a daunting process. When do you get big enough to seek out an organization like the SBA? So what needs to change, whether it's mindset, whether it's information, or policy to accelerate capital flow?
Well, I think in terms of policy, I think we really need to have some sort of minimum, not quota per se, but minimums that say, we really have to look harder to find the qualified people of either of color or gender that are not getting it today. And, sometimes it's also the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And so the bro culture says scream loud, and the bros in the Valley do all of that. Whereas the more the female founders don't stand up as strongly. the other thing I'll say, and this is also maybe a little non-PC, is that probably the most successful male founders are somewhere on the spectrum. You look at Mark Zuckerberg, you look at Bill Gates, you look at Elon Musk, they are all on the spectrum. How far up? I'm not a doctor. I am a doctor, but I'm not an MD. But and women, the most successful women founders are not. And so I think we have, as a policy, to have to look at some of that and say, what factors are driving some of these men to be so aggressive and so single-focused? Because one of the things being on the spectrum is you're very focused. Whereas the women leaders, who are great leaders, want to have the whole company work well. And the men are just, Elon does what he does. So.
Megan.
I think it starts with the ground up, beginning with recruiting and making sure that the candidate pipeline reflects the diverse perspective, including representation of women. The value that women bring to the table is already there, and as more people recognize that and women naturally move into decision-making roles, I think there'll be a comfort with seeing women as leaders and more getting comfortable to give capital to women-led funds and companies.
I would speak to the regulatory part of the question, which I've had a lot of thoughts about how you diversify the capital. As I've lived the, emerging manager, they still call you an emerging manager at Fund 3, and to break into these larger pools of capital as an emerging manager is really, really difficult. The majority of the capital these days is advised by a handful of firms, and the majority of it goes to Silicon Valley to 5 funds that frankly aren't early stage venture capital funds anymore. They're all RIAs. They are, which are basically like large private wealth management firms, PE funds. They're just much bigger money, and you really need that early stage capital and those early stage funds who fund those innovators to break through and create new funds that will diversify the capital. So I've had this idea of like, how do you shine the light on all of the endowments and all of the larger pools of capital that's advised, or if you have over $4 billion worth of capital, you should hire internally. So University of Arizona, for example, would invest probably more locally if they hired internally versus outsourcing it to an advisor on the East Coast. And I think that's what we need a little more of. The state of Alabama is one of our newest investors, and we've been dealing with that in the state. How do you get more funding to the state? It's a lot of economic development. And so I've been thinking, how do you shine a light on where all of the capital is going? We need more early stage fund capital access.
I would just add something much more simple and actionable. And I say that because yesterday we published our very first impact report, the Equity Alliance Impact Report, and it's on our website, equityalliance.fund. And the headline that I wrote is Social Capital as a Strategy for Superior Returns. And what does that mean? It just means getting together in places like this because, I've known Wendy. Why do we love Wendy so much? I've known her for 27 years, and she's always been about convening and bringing people to, 10. Bringing people together so that we can have conversations like this. Because what I find as somebody who invests mostly in just really women and people of color is that they're just not in the networks. They're not part of the conversations. They don't even know how to get to Jesse, how to get to Megan, how to get to Howard. So if we can find ways to convene in this way, I feel like we can make real progress in democratizing access to capital.
Thank you all. That's my last question. Wendy, this has been so wonderful, impactful, and informative. And I'm going to echo something else I heard that I hope that you leave out here today with 1 or 2 business cards, new friends, whatever. We're here to network and learn from each other. Thank you all so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, United in Impact.